Before I introduce our panel and our moderator tonight, what I'd like to do is just set a little bit of a framework for what we're hoping to accomplish and what these meetings are all about. This evening is actually the second in a series of conversations, community conversations, that we've begun with our Leadership Fayette alumni. The point of these sessions is really to have an opportunity to look to the future and have an engaging dialogue around topics that are critical to our community, things like education, economic development. In the first quarter, our panel was just an amazing panel of educators, folks that are involved in industry, and a young professional. And they tackled the topic, how do we prepare students for future careers that don't yet exist? For those of you that were here, you know it was an incredible dialogue, and we've set the bar pretty high for this evening. Tonight, we continue with a future focus with a dialogue about the process of creating a vision for the future of the center of our community, the 54 corridor. And again, we have a wonderful, very knowledgeable panel with us tonight that are going to give you some background and also give you a few food for thought about a concept that's been put together about this area. I want to make an important point. This is a concept. It's just a concept. It's a conversation starter. And what we hope to do tonight is to start that conversation and to start some wonderful dialogue about a vision for what could be. It's not a building plan. So, as we begin, I really want to encourage you as we finish up with the panel. Our moderator tonight is actually going to spend quite a bit of time generating a dialogue, and we're really hoping that you'll look out to the future, 15 or 20 years, and give us some thoughts about what's important to you when we look at the future of our community, the heart of our county. What's important to you? And that's the type of dialogue that we really hope to have tonight.
But I really want to go ahead and let our panelists say a few things. And Matt, why don't we start with you?
Okay. What would you like me to say?
Talk a little bit about what Fayette County Development Authority's role is and why this is so important in terms of growth, how it connects to jobs, how it connects to the future, and especially, our last panel was all about the importance of education, especially developing things in terms of having strong educational institutions in the area. How do these things connect?
It's all about jobs, 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 jobs. The economic development activities that we do at the Fayette County Development Authority are really geared towards how can we help that average citizen property owner in Fayette County have a quality of life, a work quality of life, a home quality of life that is the best that they can have in Fayette County. We look at everything from demographics and workforce information. 70% of our daytime population commutes out of the county for work every day. If you're making that drive into somewhere else outside of Fayette County, you're not close by necessarily when your kids have a ball game in the evening or other activities that you want to be home for. So one of our goals is how can we help identify jobs that meet the caliber of the workforce that's in Fayette County, plan for the future in doing so, and help bring those jobs into Fayette County so that folks, as we continue to grow and change and evolve as a community, we have quality jobs here in Fayette County.
Good, thank you. Daryl, I'll continue right down and get a few comments from you about how you see this is critically important to the direction that the county is moving in, especially the fact that we have the hospital and a pretty good hospital center as sort of the anchor of everything that's being developed. Oh, and Matt, thanks for wearing a jacket and a tie so that I'm not the only one who looks formal and stiff up here tonight, so thanks.
The whole experience with the hospital for the last now approximately 17 years has been fantastic, but it's been a real exercise in cooperating with the community. We began the design of the hospital involving the police department, the fire department, the politicians, everyone, to try to determine what kind of hospital did Fayette need. And I think that that's probably the basic reason for our success. We became a part of the community early on and didn't do anything without involving the community. So we've grown, obviously, big time, We're up to 157 beds, and we continue to grow. And we would like to have input as a viable member of the community, the largest employer in the community, into the development around us. And I think it has to be smart development, smart growth. So once again, the entire community comes in to help make those decisions, to have input, and to give us appropriate direction.
Good. Thank you very much. Yeah, tell me a little bit more about, I mean, I really think that Historical Concepts is sort of a unique organization for everybody who doesn't understand specifically what you all do. Talk to us a little bit about what you all do, what your niche is, and what the critical things are as you're going about doing your work.
Okay. As an overview, Historical Concepts was founded in 1982 by my father, Jim Strickland. We focus today on working with residential clients as well as developers and civic groups. We do work all over the Southeast and really the East Coast. This falls into a pretty large-scale civic type project, and we have worked with developers on large projects, other civic groups, and really jumping on, I'd say, Matt's coattails. This is about jobs, but having been involved with a lot of projects that have created unique opportunities, we can say, in our opinion, with somewhat of an educated eye, this is a really unique opportunity, this piece of property in this area of our county, to affect not only jobs, but also property values. Education is a big part of this. Really, it's a chance to sit down with the leadership of the community and say, what is our vision for this area? And it can affect a lot of things. And I think Fayette County, Fayetteville, all the areas of our county can benefit from innovative planning. Right. And those places that take the time to get their leadership together and proactively say, what is it that we want to see? If we see an area that's definitely going to develop, and we kind of take off the blinders of short-term thinking and say, this is a long-term vision that we're talking about. What is it that this could be? What is it that we want it to be? What is it that adds to our quality of life that we want to see happen here? It starts with meetings like this. Matt and Historical Concepts had a chance to work on the Atlanta Christian College recruiting efforts in Peachtree City, and it pretty much was the same thing. It's getting together leadership, elected officials, stakeholders, land owners, and creating what's essentially a straw man. We say visioning. It's the pretty pictures that kind of paint the picture of what could be. Right. And from there, the conversation starts, and good things can happen. And so after the Atlanta Christian College efforts, Matt came and said, hey Todd, I got another project to look at. I was on the board at the time, and I said, well, it's going to be a conflict, so this is going to be another priceless project that we're going to look at. And was glad to do so. Having been in Peachtree City and Fayette County for many, many years, we're delighted to give something back, and we consider this to be an honor to be involved with such a project and leadership such as you.
Hey Aaron, tell us a little bit about, I mean, when you're doing a project like this, it's, you've got a number of different constituent groups, and this is pretty big in terms of interacting with so many people, developing sort of a collaborative kind of working relationship. How do you do that? I mean, first of all, is that important? And how do you do it when you've got so many?
Well, that's the most important part. And when Matt came to us and said, hey, we have this project, oh, and by the way, it just happens to be next to the hospital, and oh, by the way, here's representatives from the hospital, and you had a lot of different things coming together. You have the parkway going in, you have the hospital next door saying we want to be a more integrated part of the community, and then you have various landowners saying something's going to happen here, and we all kind of want to work together, or at least try to work together to make sure that we come up with a vision that says let's do it the right way. Opportunities like that don't come up very often, and what I love doing about these projects is consensus building, getting groups together that may or may not agree at the time, and really trying to come up with solutions that kind of tap into maybe a little of what everybody brings to the table. And for those of you that were at the meetings, you know that we had a couple of days of just open charrette time in our office where we basically invited, the hospital, property owners, elected officials. I don't know who all came. There were a lot of people there, and the majority we had people around a table with trash paper flying and people drawing like crazy and just talking with folks. I mean, I remember talking with a woman who has, I think she had an acre there, and she was very concerned with what was going to happen, with her acre. And I explained, this is just a vision, so tell me what it is you want to do. And so we sat down and talked for as long as I talked with the person who had, 1,000 acres. And that's the best part of it. And then when you get through with the process, she was excited about kind of what we came up with, what might be a potential for her piece of property. So to me, that's the best part of the whole process. That's why I love doing this. That's why, Todd mentioned this is a priceless project. I mean, it's really not priceless, because at the end of the day, I think something good's going to come out of it, and it sparks this conversation. So it was worth it.
Good. Thank you very much for those comments. Matt, were you going to show us something? Go ahead.
When Virginia asked me to come out and speak about this for the topic and pull this panel together, we thought it'd be a good idea to give you in the audience somewhat of a backstory behind how we got to where we are. It's great to just show you a plan and say, here, evaluate it. But unless you have the history behind it and you get the full worldview understanding of how we came to where we are, you're never going to get the full picture here. So just take a few minutes at front just to give you a little bit of the backstory that led us from the Development Authority standpoint with the hospital and with historical concepts into where we're going today. Of course, this is all about the hospital. As Darrell said, this is the largest employer in the county, 1,400 employees in Piedmont Fayette Hospital, right in the center of the county, surrounded by, of course, you've got Peachtree City to the west, our largest municipality. You've got Fayetteville to the east. You've got Tyrone just to the north. Those are anchors, and then Piedmont Fayette is right in the middle of it all, surrounded by a mixture of suburban areas, rural areas, undeveloped areas, and growing, more congested and more potential for development areas. Take a step back. In approximately 2005, Pulte Homes came to the Board of Commissioners in Fayette County and said, we want to take this area around Piedmont Fayette Hospital and turn it into a senior living area. They, again, approximately 2005, developed a master plan for the area here. And to help orient you a little bit, this is 54 on the bottom end of the map. Piedmont Fayette Hospital is here. The configuration of Sandy Creek Road runs up and off to the northwest. And this area in here was what Pulte was proposing for a golf course community with senior gated style 55 and older homes in development here. The project ultimately never went anywhere, and ultimately they left Fayette County, went down to Griffin-Spalding and developed Sun City Peachtree, which is what came of this. But I think this proposal got a lot of folks thinking about what's going to happen in this area. 2006, the next year, City of Fayetteville and Fayette County, through their planning offices, sat down and prepared a report, a 12-page report outlining this area as a whole. It was titled the State Route 54 Hospital Area Study Task Force that was developed. This report was issued in December of '06. Again, 12 pages covering everything from the environmental state of the properties out there, the property owners. They had a number of stakeholder meetings, met with a lot of constituents there, met with the hospital, looking at what are some opportunities here. And out of this came a list of development programs, looking at a map of that entire area for potential development. It was never adopted fully by either the city or the county, but was agreed to in principle that this is an opportunity to look at our regulations, our zoning regulations, our land use regulations as we move forward in developing some other schematics for that area. One of those things that came in this was looking at development patterns, looking at in the county portion, and there was a line in this report that was demarcated just north of the hospital saying that we see the city potentially annexing property through here as developments come online for opportunities to go on sewer. North of that would be entirely out in the county. In the county development pattern, residential densities of 1 to 2 acres per unit, some office around the hospital. In the city areas, a ½ acre per unit. Also office and development, some commercial areas, looked at transportation, looked at a number of other issues, and again came up with this conceptual land use master plan area. The hammerhead down here is the city of Fayetteville's boundaries coming up from the south, wrapping around the hospital area, and then everything else is still today in the unincorporated portion of Fayette County, but they had identified in purple here potential office and mixed use type uses in here. At the corner of Tyrone Road, they had a large commercial center planned in this area. Yellow would be higher density homes inside the city limits, and eventually the city could annex along this arc to the south. And then to the north in yellow would stay in the unincorporated county, would be larger lot, traditional, what we've seen in Fayette County. This was before we at the Development Authority ever got involved in this process. This was just city and county through their planning offices working at long-range planning under their own mindset. At the same time, of course, the West Fayetteville bypass was in design phase looking forward. This is a document from 2008 looking at the Phase 1 concept plan. This was the alignment pretty much that we know today from what's been constructed on the West Fayette bypass, splitting here at Sandy Creek, coming down to the west side of the hospital, tying in here at Lester Road, Hewitt Road, where the BP station is, and then wrapping back around to the south. When this started moving forward, again, the county and city have looked at some stuff, and what's interesting, if I go back and look at the plan here, that road alignment was initially just to the western side of the hospital. The hospital is here. There were some detention ponds at one point. It was actually going to come up on the east side of the middle school that's now down here. As the road actually moved forward and progressed, from a right-of-way standpoint, from a design standpoint, some of those things didn't continue to work, and it was ultimately shifted towards the west back to where that BP station is. When we saw that and we started looking at these things that are in the paper, that are out there in the public, from a Development Authority standpoint, we were also interested in looking at opportunities for, again, what I mentioned earlier, 70% of our population goes out of the county for work. It's a white-collar population. Where are we going to look for jobs for office, white-collar type employees? The medical centers are growing. If there's anywhere in the county that is going to grow potentially for office and medical uses, it's going to be around the hospital. That's almost a given. With the road shifting in here, with this design coming in, we started looking at it from the Development Authority standpoint of, do we need to start looking for opportunities for new office space in the future? We had taken those initial plans the county city had done, looking at the road alignment activity, and internally had worked on just a rough hospital area use plan at the Development Authority level, pulling in those things, pretty much keeping things the same. You had Piedmont Fayette here. There was going to be a need for some service areas for commercial close to the hospital. 1,400 employees here. There's a lot of demand for services. Looking at opportunities for an R&D park, office uses close to the hospital here, and then going back to what the city and county had already looked at here for some sort of residential to the north of there. We tweaked it a little bit. We played with it. We actually had Georgia Power, who is one of our economic development partners, who has a community design department, look at putting some rough schematics on paper here. And again, this is looking at the hospital here. We've got a lot of stuff going on, but looking at some sort of R&D, industrial park, again with tech, medical uses in here. The Board of Education had already purchased a large site here for a future education campus. So all these pieces were out there. Looked at, again, that from the technology standpoint, at this time when we first did this internally, very traditional, large lot, office, traditional uses, what you might see in the West Park area of Peachtree City, was our initial concept as we move forward there. The school site had already had a plan for what their high school site would look like on that 60 acres they had here. We adapted that, brought that in. And then we had a conversation with Todd Strickland on historical concepts. Historical was, every year, every summer, they bring in some students from the University of Miami involved in some community planning. They had students coming in during the summer, and the students needed a project. And I said, Todd, have I got a project for you? I took our rough schematics we had done looking at office areas and said, okay, we want to look at this area from an office standpoint. Here's the stuff that city and county has already done in looking at some schematics in here. We've done some rough drawings. Can you give us a quick little easy mock-up, is what I said. Todd said, we can do you one better. We'll give this to our students coming in. We'll do some charrettes. We'll talk with some stakeholders out there, and we'll try and work you up a nice plan here. Bring all of these different elements together. We had a number of charrette meetings, had some concept drawings in here. I know this is hard to see here, but looking at different bubble diagrams for uses, looking at road layouts, sketching, as Todd said, on lots of trash paper, doing some stuff, throwing it up on the board and looking at it. And these are a lot of the students that were in there doing some of that initial work themselves, guided by Jim Strickland and Aaron Daly, Historical Concepts, helping them understand how the process works when you have to design work, but having essentially a real client there looking at things too. And ultimately, this was the plan that group came up with. And there's another copy of it on the board in the back of the room as well. And I'm going to turn this over to Aaron here in just a second to let him walk you through some of the details in this plan. As Virginia said, this is a concept. This was something to throw up on the wall and say, let's start a discussion about this area here. We know we have a need for more job centers in the county. We know we have a population. Again, this is 2008, 2009, going through this process. We know that Fayette County is a growing community. We know the hospital is a growing area. We know there are a lot of things that are taking place that if we don't get in front of what's happening, before you know it, you're going to have requests at the city level, at the county level for a gas station on a corner, a drugstore on the corner, a large shopping center of a traditional sense. And it was our perspective that that's not what we wanted to see the center of Fayette County looking like. You know, this isn't a large grocery store shopping center or a large retail shopping event out here. That's not what the center, that's not what anyone has ever said they wanted in the center of Fayette County. This is looking at a service area around the hospital with some opportunities for high-level white-collar employment as well. What can we do as a community to get in front of any developers that might be coming down the line in the future so that we can have a plan in paper that says, when they come to the door, we'd like to develop in your area, we can say, okay, well, here's what we as a community have agreed on. If you can make your interests match what we've agreed on here, we'd love to have you. Come on down. If you can't, well, there are other communities. So with that, I'm going to let Aaron kind of walk you through some of the neighborhoods and some of the details here. And Aaron, I'll stay up here and kind of guide things and let you talk.
I think to start, it is important. I think you did say it, but you know, this isn't our plan. I mean, we had, you saw a few of the photographs of the charrettes we had, but you know, we had 2 days of open charrettes where we just said, if you're interested, come on down. You know, and we were trying to keep track of who all came in, but I mean, after a while we just stopped because people were coming in and out of our door so fast, and we just kept drawing as fast as we could and putting stuff on the wall. So I mean, we were really facilitating folks' ideas as they came in and told us what they wanted, you know, told us what they didn't want, told us what they were concerned about. I mean, we heard it all, and you know, from you know, congestion to you know, to traffic, to, you know, we had representatives from the school district there saying what they had to have in a school, and you know, we had citizens coming, you know, what do they love about, you know, driving down Sandy Creek Road? I mean, just the feeling of it, and so all of that came together and you know, into what you see here, and essentially when we're looking at the overall plan, we don't have the benefit of seeing a aerial without the drawings that we drew on it. But essentially what we did is we allowed the topography and the vegetation on the site to start to dictate a little bit of what we were doing. So, you know, we came up with the concept of essentially these 4, we call them hamlets, and 2 neighborhoods, you know, down on either side of the hospital. Really, I mean, I'd like to think it's because we were brilliant and we came up with a great idea, but if you take all that off, you'll see that's where there weren't trees, and there were existing roads there, and you know, people that put roads in, you know, a long time ago, you know, they were no dummies. They put roads where roads were easy to put in, and so we tried to take advantage of as much of that as we possibly could, and really, given that we were doing it in a relatively short time frame, trying to build off of the people that are much smarter than we are that kind of came before us and laid the initial groundwork. So,
and let me add, there were a couple of caveats we said two historical concepts as well. Number one, we had this kind of overarching document the city county had developed. Ultimately, densities in here, we didn't want to get down into minutia and focus on densities. Again, this wasn't a plan for development. This was a conceptual character setting area drawing to say this is what it could be like. But we knew that there were some outlines in that document that kept this area relatively not dense. I mean, it is a overall still pretty suburban to rural character out there, and that's what we wanted to maintain. We may have shifted some densities around a little bit, but for the most part, you're not looking at a very dense development here. We also knew, based on what the county was doing with the construction of the West Fayette bypass here, the goal here was to convey traffic through. We did not add any median cuts, any extra access points than the county had already built into their drawing there. And we kind of looked at it as well to say, based on, again, the land use plan that's been adopted, the character areas the city and county had looked at, and the activity that was going on, we wanted to stay within that framework. So with that, I'm going to let Aaron, I'll let you keep going here.
All right. Like I said, we divided the plan into essentially 4 hamlets. We named the hamlets after families who kind of owned maybe the majority of the property that eventually have become the hamlet. This one is to the north. It's on Sandy Creek. The feedback that we were getting from folks that were driving through and owned property here was the rural nature of Sandy Creek. I mean, they loved driving down Sandy Creek, seeing the farmland, the pasture land on either side of them. So what we looked at doing was creating an area here that would not only, I know Matt said we're not going to talk about counts and everything, but we knew that this was projected to stay in the county, and with 1 to 2 houses per, or 1 house for every 1 to 2 acres, we had a number in our head that said, okay, if this area, which is approximately 800 acres in the county, were to follow that development pattern, we had about kind of a rough number of 400 to work with. So we knew that we definitely did not want to add more than that, and we wanted to actually try to do less than that. And so while we don't have numbers to go with this, we know that it's a very low density and it does meet that count. But you can see by taking that number and just not changing the number, but just shifting where those houses occur, it allowed us to maintain the largest kind of contiguous amount of green space, farmland around the existing road. And then we incorporated things like, there were existing barns in the area, thinking that could be you could maintain that as a working farm. It might be the actual production part of a neighborhood farm or something like that. So we incorporated things like a farmer's market or that. But you'll see that a lot of green space around the road. That was the primary focus for that particular hamlet.
And these are just some photos of, as they were doing their drawings, looking at representations of having a farmer's market like what you might see up at Serenby right now. From a commercial standpoint, there may be a need at one of the corners there for some sort of commercial service area, very, very small, very rural in character, something you might see if you were driving down 92 in the south end of Fayette County. From a residential standpoint, looking at larger homes on larger lots.
Very much kind of farm-oriented. As we're doing this, we're always, because architecture is what we do. I mean, we're always looking at what the architecture might look like and pulling out precedents.
You want to give a character to each hamlet, and that's where we kind of tied into the names and the history, and there's an identity that goes with each, and that's one of the things that Historical Concepts looks at, is not creating places that just look like the same old, same old. Each one has its own specific identity, and it needs to tie into the history of a place, and tying into that heritage, in our opinion, creates a place that has greater value.
The next one, this is Trammell Hamlet. It's to the west. The shape is like that really because as you look at the topography and the clear area, it was a very dynamic area on the property. And so we had things like the power line easement that's already there. You know, there were certain givens. The parkway was already there. The power line easement was already there. So we were trying to think of, when you think of freeform, you start thinking of Olmsted and the landscape that he did. And so this hamlet takes on that freeform shape. But again, it's larger lots because we know it's going to remain in the county. We took advantage of clear space that was in the power easement. Everybody comes up with great ideas of what you can do in power easements, and it's always soccer fields and things like that. And the idea of having soccer fields under high power lines always makes me nervous. But so we came up with the idea of solar power farms that are essentially out of sight, but will hopefully generate a portion of the power, because obviously everything we're doing here is trying to be as self-sustaining as possible. So you see all the farms that were maintained on the edge of this hamlet, and again the free-form nature of the road. So much smaller than the others, but has maybe more of a small village feel than the others. And like Todd said, the idea with the hamlets was to create a sense of identity, so that if somebody is living there, they say, "Oh yeah, I live in Trammell Hamlet," or "I live in Rivers Hamlet." So if you're proud of where you live and you have that sense of identity with it, you're more apt to take care of it, to maintain it. Lester Hamlet. This is the hamlet now. We're now getting into the hamlets that, at least according to the future plan use, might be annexed into the city. So we were able to work with higher densities. The interesting features of this one is, the school district had already purchased, had a good piece of land that they anticipated that they would use at some point. And then of course you have the highway to the south. So those are two interesting features that we worked with. The concept to the south was, instead of having kind of your typical strip mall development, each one with its own entrance, own curb cut off the highway, which has its own problems. The idea here was we knew that the land wanted to be developed in some sort of commercial aspect, so we said, how can you accommodate the same function as a strip mall, which is obviously commercial establishments, but do it in a more rural way. So the idea was to pull it off the street, and by pulling it off the street, which is right down there, you actually create more visible frontage as you're driving in either direction on the highway. You actually, instead of taking the frontage right on the street, you're now pulling it back, but you're actually creating the frontage on the left and the right side of that. So you're actually seeing the stores for a longer distance of time. So it takes what stores want, which is visibility, and then it takes obviously what we want, which is to get away from that strip mall concept. And I hope you have a picture of that. We have pictures of some other developments that have that same character. There it is. But you see the idea. Of course, we're always doing fun things like saying, "Oh, what if we found an old water tower and refurbished it?" There could be some signage on that, but try to accomplish what we know folks need in a strip mall type setting, which is the visibility and access, but do it in a more rural fashion that would be more pleasing.
So of course the beauty here is you've got traffic going down Highway 54 here, but you've pulled this commercial back. You've changed the character, so it's not that 8-unit brick facade or stone facade, masonry facade right there up on the street with a strip of parking in front. You've pulled it back. You've given it more of a neighborhood character here. You've added this park area in front. Can you imagine going in with your kids and getting an ice cream here in an old village type style and being able to walk over to the park and eat your ice cream?
And one of the things that struck me was, as you're driving down 54, you're hit by storefront after storefront after storefront. It gets monotonous, and you kind of lose where you are. In my opinion, it's the lack of the storefront here that makes you stop and wonder what's going on. Storefront, 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 and then all of a sudden you see this green space, and there's stores there, but they're set back in a different setting. the fact that it's different is what's going to make it stand out.
I thought what was really interesting when we went through this process as well, the development of a little bit of a story behind it to say, you know, this is roughly at the intersection of Tyrone Road and 54. What if a little village had grown up there at that intersection? And this was the ultimate, that small village area that had been left over the years. Maybe it was an old farmer's village. And this is what has resulted from that over the years. And you build in that character and that story, and it really does then have a sense of place and a sense of character to that area there that's recognizable then when people start talking about, oh yeah, you know, go to the old water tower and hang a right. That character area is what people start, when they talk about, you know, where you came from, the small town you grew up in, these are the feelings that are evoked in a design like this and trying to build towards a character like this.
Okay, and this is where we start getting into the neighborhoods, and it really flanks on either side of the hospital. You know, Crystal Lake neighborhood obviously is on the east end of the hospital, on the, you know, between the hospital and Crystal Lake. And here the idea was, you know, we knew that Crystal Lake was an amenity, and we knew that the hospital was an amenity. I mean, this is a you know, has a unique set of kind of you know, bookends here. You know, with the hospital being right there, it seemed like a perfectly logical place for some form of assisted living facility. We also knew that the hospital, you know, employs, you know, there's a wide range of income brackets at the hospital. So one of the concepts here was to create neighborhoods on either side of the hospital where folks could live, work, and play. The idea being, you know, it really came out of the concern about you know, traffic that this might develop. You know, we're building this parkway to act as a parkway. We don't want it to serve more traffic. So if we can get folks that work at the hospital to live near the hospital, you know, it helps to solve that problem. And this one, because of obviously Crystal Lake, was an opportunity to, what we thought, maybe satisfy the you know, maybe toward the upper end of the income bracket. So we did things like you know, larger homes overlooking the lake. You know, one of the unique features about it was, rather than put 4 or 5 big lots on the lake that would have been, you know, a no-brainer to sell, they would have been the 5 easiest lots to sell. What we did was we actually pulled all the homes back from the lake and created a park on the lake so that you create an amenity that everybody living in the area can enjoy. So instead of kind of raising 4 or 5 boats, by doing this, you're essentially raising all the boats in the harbor by saying, you know, it doesn't matter if you live in that red house right there. If you live in the house behind that red house, you have just as much access to the lake as the person that lives in that red house. So your values are increased. So,
Aaron and Matt, one of the things that irks me about metropolitan Atlanta is that it's not a very pedestrian-friendly place. You have to get in a car to go every place,
that's
transport system is limited in where it goes.
You know, and that's really key to everything that we do, and is particularly key for this. Yeah, the goal was, again, the big concern was, you know, traffic, and you know, and the hospital saying, we really want to be an integral part of a neighborhood. We don't want to be a walled off campus, you know, that people say, oh, that's the hospital over there behind that wall. I mean, the idea was that the neighborhood and the hospital just kind of start to blend together a little bit. And so, yeah, everything we do is about circulation, pedestrian, and you know, the hamlets in our mind are all connected by, you know, natural trails that kind of get you through the wetlands, because there are wetlands that separate the various hamlets. So
we did have multi-use cart paths tying in some of this into what Fayetteville's already doing off of Lester Road, emulating some of what Peachtree City has done, in looking at providing those alternative transportation, being able to take a golf cart, being able to run or jog or walk those areas there. Absolutely.
And then the West Fayetteville neighborhood, which that's the name we came up with. I wish we would have come up with another one, but it was to the west, you know, the west side of the hospital. This is really where I think the integration of the hospital and the neighborhoods is taken to a really, I think, a high level. It is probably the most active component. It's the area where I think you would have different housing types, whether it be, you know, townhouses or, you know, multi-unit houses. Again, to try to accommodate this wide spectrum of folks that are working at the hospital, giving everybody the opportunity to walk to the hospital or take the golf cart to the hospital. But this also is where, there was the idea of a like a college campus or a research facility. This is where it's incorporated, and this is where really the Parkway obviously has the biggest impact on this one. Is how do you accommodate what the hospital wants, which is a lot of activity and a lot of kind of healthcare related functions, but do it in a way that hopefully won't add congestion to the Parkway. And what we did was we introduced a grid which gives you the ultimate flexibility and kind of how things grow and morph. But we also said, okay, there's 3 curb cuts on the Parkway. We're definitely not going to add any more curb cuts that are already there. And then we're going to do everything we can do to try to minimize traffic on the 3 curb cuts that are there. So we did things like parallel roads. So to get from the south side here to the north side, you don't have to get onto the Parkway and go that quarter mile, which just adds another car, and then get off. You have the option, you probably have 60 options of different ways to get up there. And then you also have kind of the parallel road that you can see just to the east side of the Parkway there, that then kind of wraps around a central park. And then one of the other things we did here, and we'll talk about the hospital in a second, and then we'll that'll be a great segue into what Daryl will have to say. But refocusing kind of the entrance to the west there, with the hospital on the east end, and then culminating in what we have is a kind of a neighborhood square and a neighborhood plaza on the west, and then that interfaces with the Parkway in that what we had proposed was a kind of a bridge of some sort that would actually get you over the Parkway, so that even if you lived on the in the hamlet to the west, you didn't have to get in your car, cross the Parkway to get there. You could actually just go across, whether it by car or bicycle or golf cart path. And then just some conceptual imagery of what kind of we saw that area looking like, some of the homes in the area, townhomes. This is the view of the 54 is on the bottom side here. The hospital is to the right, and the idea was to actually, instead of having a separate hospital entrance and a separate entrance to the town, to basically have one central entrance. And of course, we have a civic structure at the end there as the terminus, and then the hospital to the right, and kind of grows into the hamlet. And the idea being that there might be a nursing college or flower shops and whatnot that would be related to what the hospital wants. But also be what the folks living in the hamlet would want as well. And then this is a view of the plaza and square. The Parkway is on the bottom here, and you can kind of see the bridge over the top of it. But again, it's a square that would be used for functions. Farmers markets, folks would come in from the hamlets.
When I think about places like,
maybe come and sell their wares.
And I've had a chance to, I've been fortunate enough to travel quite a bit. When I think about places like the Silicon Valley, certain areas around Austin, Texas, the Research Triangle in North Carolina, the corridor up around Boston, you seem to have a number of things that conflude. You have some sort of educational institution or institutions that sort of provide a base for continuing education or that drive certain kinds of research. You have access to capital usually, but then the critical thing, and in particular in all of those areas, is the people. And you attract people who are innovative, who are creative. You have a diversity of minds, a diversity of ideas, but somehow they have to come together to sort of match their ideas and collaborate and interact. Does this plan drive that kind of human interaction in your minds?
It does. I think one of the things that Daryl and Tracy with the hospital had said, we're the obviously we're a huge economic engine here, but they wanted forms of higher education. They want to surround themselves with forms of higher education. So the idea was we were always trying to figure out, okay, you know, where could we put a college campus, and where could we put a nursing college? Where could we put, I mean, the idea was not to create these individual little entities, but to create a way that you could have these pieces, but they all interact to create that, like you said, kind of a research triangle, you know, that area.
Hang on to the questions. Let's get to Daryl. Let's go ahead and hear a little bit from Daryl.
Actually, I'd like to elaborate a little bit on one of Matt's earlier comments, and I'll start off being very humble, and then I'll throw humility to the wind. It's hard. Matt commented that this is all about the hospital. This is not all about the hospital. This is all about Fayette County. And when I came down here, Fayette County didn't have a hospital. The hospital that you now have has been named to the top 100 hospitals in the United States more times than any other hospital in the state. It's also been named to the top 10% of community hospitals across the nation. It's also in the top 5% of emergency departments across the nation, and that's based on a volume of seeing 63,000 patients every year. So why is the hospital involved in this? We're involved in this because we want the rest of that development to be like Piedmont Fayette Hospital. And we think that that's something that the county can take a great deal of pride in. But as far as it's for the hospital, we'll go right ahead without you and we'll do fantastic. We'd prefer to have you with us and to be part of that development where you have something that you can look at and say, gosh, we've got a college, we've got a research center, we've got all of these opportunities, we've got an aging population, and now we've got a place for those people to live that's convenient to access services and so forth. Could we have done this differently? I've been approached by plenty of developers over the last 17 years who want the hospital to jump on board with them and do something. An example, we talked about research. Well, there are different ways to do research. I was approached with a company that wanted to train physicians. They wanted to put the research center next to the hospital campus and use the resources of the hospital. There was one small catch. The research center had to have a pig farm because they used pigs in their research as cadavers. I nixed it based on the fact that I didn't particularly want the odor from a pig farm accompanying the hospital. So your decisions are sometimes very simple, very straightforward. We don't own the land, so we can't necessarily tell people what to do with it. The landowner wants maximum amount of money per acre for their property. The developer wants a return on his investment that's as great as he can make it. The community wants something they can be proud of, that they can utilize, that they can point to and say that they had a say in how that was developed, and look how wonderful it is and how well people cooperate, how well people get around, what a fantastic place it is to go to for food or for shopping or for other things. So it has absolutely nothing to do with the hospital.
Thanks, Daryl. Hey, look, not yet. I want to get to the audience, but I wanted to get one more comment from you all, and in particular, Daryl. We know that the hospital, that a medical facility, a high-tech medical facility, provides a direct kind of benefit in terms of the people and employees, but then there are these ancillary benefits from the other medical professionals and other people that are attracted, independent contractors, pharmaceutical folks, medical device, all the other things that come with having offices around. And then the most important piece, I think, is the fact that we've got a Class A medical facility within spitting distance of where we live. So do you have any approximate numbers as to the direct economic impact that we get from?
Wow. No, I could throw out some numbers.
Go ahead, throw something out. No, well, we know that there is a direct and indirect and all of these other things that come from it.
Very
right?
Definitely, and we have people that go to extremes to be associated with the hospital. Even to be able to say we're located across from the hospital or we're affiliated with the hospital. So there are a lot of opportunities out there for that. In terms of the actual dollar amounts, that's more in Matt's area to forecast how many billions of dollars this means to the community. So I'll leave that to him.
Okay. Well, we've got some great comments from the panel. Let's get some feedback from our most esteemed audience here. But this is what I want you to think about. I want to ask you all a question, and when you think about what we've talked about today in terms of where we're going to be 1 to 2 decades out, how does this reflect what you see as something that is beneficial for the future of Fayette County? So I want you to think about that as you sort of frame your comments and ask your questions. So let's get a few comments from our audience. Anyone? Well, you all have done such a great job. No one wants to say anything. Anybody, any comments, any questions? Yes, Debbie, thank you.
I'd like to go back to something Daryl said about the aging population. We have the 3rd fastest growing senior population in Metro Atlanta. 25% of our population is over the age of 50. Yes, we are. And the 65-year-old population is projected to grow by a staggering 450% by 2040. Can you all elaborate? I think it's really important and interesting to understand how this concept ties back to those specific demographics and how that will address those needs.
And Debbie, tell us who you are and what your role is in the...
Debbie Britt, I'm the President and CEO of Fayette Senior Services.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good question. Good comment. Folks?
Can I tackle that? Sure. Debbie, you and I have had some conversations about this already. In fact, I learned recently that the center that you're managing has grown by leaps and bounds in the last 4 years to the point where you've outgrown your current site. And I spoke with a couple of people about, well, wouldn't that be great if the center, the senior center, were next to the hospital. From the standpoint of education and interaction, it'd be fantastic. So that's a possibility as far as development. I've even looked into could the hospital donate the land. So there are some factors I think that go into that that would certainly help with the development. But anytime you add people to a situation like that, then you have other services that those people need and want, and it just starts to bloom. And when Matt talked about it's all about the hospital, that's what he meant, that's the nucleus, that's the start, that's the fire starter, that's the ignition, that's what gets everything else cranked up in terms of development to meet those needs.
The thing that I always like to remind people of is that when you think about where we are now in the early part of the 21st century, and I look around this room, a lot of the folks in this room are going to live long lives. I mean, a great number of us could possibly live to be 100, and the other half of us are going to live to be close to that. I mean, think about Mike Wallace, who just passed away a day or two ago. He was 93, and he was very active, you know, on the air right up into his 9th decade. So we're going to have these very long, active lives as we continue to move into our senior savvy, mature years. So again, think about how we interact with everything that we've talked about today. Our educational institutions are going to be critically important. Our healthcare institutions are going to be important. I mean, we've got access to all the latest drugs now. We can control our cholesterol, our hypertension. We have drugs that will allow us to grow hair, and we can have hip and knee replacements and even have sex the rest of our lives. So that may or may not be a good thing. But again, I really think that the kind of services that you're providing are not just a service, but really a lifestyle now in terms of how we move into the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th careers. So I really think that that's
I want to add from a design standpoint, you know, all the representatives that we talked to from the hospital, you know, it was very important to them that senior services be associated with the hospital, very closely, and a lot of that, is proximity and outreach and whatnot. But, from from I think representatives from Fayette Senior Services, I mean, we heard, aging in place is very important. And so one of the things that we tried to do was to say, just like the hospital didn't necessarily want to be this standalone campus, at least we didn't think that the Fayette Senior Services wanted to be this kind of standalone campus, because there can sometimes be a negative stigma attached to services like that. So we said, how can we incorporate that into the neighborhood so that everybody feels like that they're part of the neighborhood, and also by having kind of these various hamlets that have various housing types. The idea was, when you reach the end of a certain phase in your life and you go on to the next phase, sometimes having to move out of your house and leaving all your neighbors and whatnot to move into another, we want to stay away from that as much as possible. So how could you allow somebody to essentially move on to maybe another level of care, but not have to leave all their neighbors and leave all their friends? I mean, all this is still within a walking distance away, so you're not moving on the other side of town. You're just kind of moving into maybe another neighborhood in the, So that was
what was
important
your
to us.
membership 4 years ago? What was your membership then, and what is it now?
4 years ago? Well, at the center, we started 4 years ago with 38 seniors coming to the center, and now we have nearly 2,000, and we've just expanded our partnership in the city of Peachtree City as well. Aside from a place where active older adults come and to, again, contribute to the health and wellness of the community, what's important is exactly what you said, Aaron, is the other supportive services. How do you get from A to B when you no longer drive any motorized vehicle? How do you improve access to health care? Those are essential, and so that's why I go back to the demographics. And I think those are very significant facts to look at in this concept when you look at lifelong communities. So I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Other comments from our most esteemed audience? Boy, you all are some good-looking folks.
Thank you. Greg Clifton. I'm piggybacking on what Debbie had to say about the senior tsunami. The only thing I saw in the plans...
Hey, I resemble that remark.
Yeah, well...
Wait a minute.
Several of us in here do. Those of us that still have some here anyway. But the only thing I saw in the plan was the senior above 50 living area over by Bennett Lake, as far as anything that was drawn into this plan. Did I miss something, or is that something that needs to be more thought put into? Because piggybacking right on what she said, that we need to be providing places for 50 up seniors to be able to live that are still very active, very healthy. And no doubt many of us will live to be 90, but I had two parents that had difficulties. My mother was in a wheelchair for half her life. Well, not in a wheelchair half her life, but anyway, I know a lot of our seniors will not be mobile, and we'll need to provide facilities and services and whatnot for that. So is that something that's been addressed at all?
The plan was intentionally left fairly generic in that, that was one of the easier areas that we identified, had great proximity to the hospital. It's probably unfortunate that was the only area that we identified, but the concept was that you could have, dispersions. You could have this type of function all over the place, and different areas would accommodate different types of housing, different proximities, so different activity levels. So
this is a macro level of planning, and within that there's the grid system that Aaron alluded to earlier, and within that is a block structure, and each block can be changed to a residential focus for seniors, or it could be something we may look at it and say this lends itself more to an office component. It may even be something that ties into a symbiotic new educational component.
Virginia, would you do me a favor and sort of chart that comment that was just made? Thank you.
I would say, rather than having kind of these pockets of, okay, this is, elderly, living or something over 55, you're going to have a certain amount of that because there are certain facilities that need that type of structure. But I really do see, having, age dispersion kind of, throughout everything. I mean, one of the first houses I bought when I got out of school, was in between two elderly couples, and having just gotten married and not knowing what in the world I was doing in life. I mean, that was the best situation I could have ever been in. I mean,
Wait a minute, Aaron, you're trying to intone that you know what you're doing now?
I don't, well, okay. I make it up better now, but I see a lot of that happening. I mean, I think that type of, not only, that type of, age.
As Todd said, this is a straw man. This is something to put on a piece of paper to say, really from a character standpoint, what do these neighborhoods look like and feel like?
Well, this Randy Weaver with the Chamber Board, that leads right into my question. What's it going? We'll talk a little bit about some of the steps it's going to take what may be dormant now and rise it back up, and this whole concept and idea. That's probably a question for you, Matt.
Well, ultimately, we don't own this property. We can't sell this property. We're not going to develop this property. We being the Fayette County Development Authority, we being the city, being the county. Ultimately, this comes down to, does a property owner want to move their property or not? And when do they want to do that? And can we have the structures in place so that when those times come, we're ready to meet this need? Is this the plan we want? Maybe, maybe not. And that to me is somewhat moot. I think we need to flesh it out further and say, from a community standpoint, I think it's a great starter. Is this what we want? And if so, let's move forward. And if not, let's change it and tweak it and modify it and make it what we want it to be. And then it comes down to a government standpoint of what, from a regulation standpoint, needs to be in place. Are there design codes? And we talked about that early in the process of next steps being the development of a design code for that area that looks into things like how big lots are and gets into more in-depth planning activities. Is something the city and the county could potentially adopt, where when that developer or that property owner sells that property and comes forward, the city or county can say, here's what we as a community have agreed on, here are the rules and regulations in place, so that now you can go out and build what we as a community have said we would like to see out there.
It's really interesting. I've had an opportunity to be in places like Singapore or South Korea or even some places in China where growth is sort of demanded and directed from a central government. And you can look around metropolitan Atlanta and see good examples of really well thought out developments and stuff that just doesn't make sense. Why is this kind of planning important as we move forward? Why is it important that we have this kind of dialogue?
That's actually a fundamental question I think we got to answer at the very onset of this. Why in the world would anybody want to get involved from a government standpoint and try to guide what would happen potentially with private development?
Right.
And if you can't answer that well, we're really spinning our wheels and shouldn't be involved with it. In my opinion, I think we've talked about this at length, you want to get involved and kind of proactively guide something if it won't happen in the way that you're hoping, in the way that will best benefit the community left to its own devices. And there's a lot of landowners that are involved with this, and there's quite frankly a way of developing that is easier than this. This is a more complex animal of development. As we're talking about symbiotic uses that might go around the hospital and what might be perfect for the silver tsunami and how we want to attract them and take advantage of continuing education opportunities. These are all really great grand designs, but it's hard to accommodate those, and if it's something that's left to its own devices, that we kind of cross our fingers and hope that developers will show up and do something like that, I'd say the chances of that happening are really slim and none. You will wind up with a Walmart on the corner over here, or a Walgreens, and you'll have some out parcel. You might get an enlightened developer for a piece of it.
I've been to Houston.
Yeah, well, it's not to throw stones, but it's really to just recognize if you want something that is unique, it's going to take more work. And you have to get all the stakeholders involved in the process. Landowners are a very key part in this. And the first thing that they're going to ask when you show a plan like that is, oh, whoa, I know that I could sell my property for this today, and you just put a big green belt in the front of this. Why in the world would I do that? And so you start to get into something where you're saying, well, maybe there's a transfer of development rights. There's a lot more public space and infrastructure that goes along with this, and you have to trade that off with density to make it financially feasible. There's developers in this crowd, and if we're going to get this really started well, I think it's important to recognize that there's costs that go with this, and you got to talk about what's the character that you want this to look like, and what are the costs that trade off for words like density. How dense do we want it? As we were first riding along this, and I had Matt come by and say we're going to look at something here, my heart kind of sank because I looked at it and said, I love this property. It's kind of a bucolic nature, and I think that what makes Fayetteville great over here and Peachtree City great over here is a wonderful green swath in between that's different than going from Peachtree City to Noonan, where they've kind of developed it all between and it looks like the same old, same old.
Good, Todd. Thanks. Bob, go ahead.
Bob Reeves with the Chamber Board. So what I'm hearing and a question is, you're trying to plan a community such as Peachtree City. I mean, in as far as it has been planned. I think... I guess I have a problem that we get hung up with the idea that we're trying to just do something. What you're trying to do is just start a plan. And as Peachtree City was started as a plan, and how it turned out, is that what y'all are?
I think that's a good outline of it. I think, this situation, you don't have a master developer in place like Peachtree City did through its permutations of development there. But I think we do have a community that has a vested interest in this area. We want to see it develop in a quality way that everyone is, the thing you don't want is it to develop in a way where all of a sudden we've got people in Fayette County who say, you know what, I'm tired of living here and I want to move out. That's what I think we have to be strong about, and saying, look, this is the future. This is the future for us. This is the future for our children. There's a train coming. Yeah, that train's slowed down right now, and it may slow down for the next 10 years or more. But eventually that train is going to continue to move forward. And either we get in front of that train and lay down the track so it goes where we want it to go, or we let it barrel us and run us over. And this is an opportunity, in my mind, and going through this whole process, to say, where are those tracks, where are we laying down, and where are we going?
And Matt, you're right. And even if we're on the right track, if you just sit there, you'll get run over. So it's a good thing that we're actually thinking about laying tracks. Well, that was supposed to work.
Hi, I'm Terry DeMarco from the Chamber. I'm on the board. One of my questions, I have 4 daughters, and I've put 3 off to college, and nobody wants to come home. They like where they're living. I've got one down in LaGrange that stayed down there. I have one that is working in Fayette County and is looking to DeKalb because she wants what Aaron had said, the live, play, and work area. And what's sad is we're not keeping our young children here. The ones that we send off to college, I want them here. I don't know about you guys. I like my kids close by. And what scares me is we are a growing elderly, we're all going to get old, but we've got to bring the younger kids back in and have something for them. That is exactly it. DeKalb, as the outside is pretty not so good, they've got the farmers markets and the things, and that's what's going to bring our young children home to stay, and like Pam, all the conservation, the walking trails and all that. We don't have that in Fayetteville per se. I mean,
so what would attract young people back?
Have my daughters come. I don't know. I just think that this is the things that they were saying, the farmers markets and the colleges and the things like that is going to bring the young kids here, which will definitely, will keep the old. We're not going anywhere, but you want to pull back our children.
But not a pig farm. A pig farm wouldn't do it for you. Okay.
That brings, something
Yeah.
that we've talked a little bit about as far as, I think they call it sort of the third place.
Mm-hmm.
You've got your home and you've got where you work, but sort of how do you get to that community building place, that space where you come together?
But what does that mean when you use the term third place?
I think it really, you think about your home as your first place.
Mm-hmm.
You think about your work maybe as your second place. But, when I think about sort of what's important to me as we look at that center of our community, it's how do we build that third space, that place where as a community we can have places to come together. And I think you touch on that a little bit, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit on, has there been some specific thinking of putting that third space or whatever you call it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot of public areas within the plan that we laid out. And again, it's just a straw man, and how the public spaces actually evolve over time is really immaterial. It's really a matter of saying the character of the built environment and creating public spaces is important. And you got to allow for that, and that will attract the people that you're targeting. A college is a key part of this. If you have a college campus there that's not just for maybe seniors who are looking for continuous, lifelong learning, which is great in and of itself, and that needs to be targeted and provided for. But maybe you also have AP classes that your high school students can take, or maybe you have a full-blown campus. And you look what's happening out at Fairburn. There's all sorts of continuing education opportunities that are out there, and Fayette County needs this, and what we have with Clayton State is terrific, but we really need to ramp that up even more and have that allowed for. I think that would be part of keeping people in Fayette County, because if you go to college in a county, there's a lot of people that tend to stay where they go to college. So that's just one of many ideas.
The interesting thing is, I think in these types of plans, it's better to absolutely decide what you don't want in those areas and concentrate on some of those things. Big box retail, it is going to be the most attractive site in the county for further big box retail. And they are going to come and they are going to want to build there when the economy comes back. And I think that's the absolute worst thing that could happen to Fayette County. We've got a solid base in Fayetteville. We've got a solid base in Peachtree City. And the last thing we want to do is decapitate that business on both ends of the county and have it flush in the middle, along with the traffic that comes with that, because it's a regional draw. I think the other thing is with the DeKalb County analogies and the Fulton County analogies, and I've lived in 5 counties in metropolitan Atlanta, and I live here, and I actually said this in a talk that I gave in Cobb County last Saturday, and I said it in a very non-offensive way, but I said the reason we have succeeded in Fayette County is because we're not like Cobb County, and we're not like Cherokee County, and we're not like DeKalb County. There's a reason that we've had people with a certain level of affluence that have decided to move into this community. And for example, you look at Fresh Market, and people kept saying, I want a Whole Foods, I want a Fresh Market. Well, you know what? You've got to have a certain population in order for that store to exist. Or you've got to have people of the right level of income, fewer people who have the level of income who can fund that type of business. So these are things that you really need to think about. And I think staying with the population density numbers that would be commensurate to something that you would have in the county otherwise is a very wise thing to do, because I hear the landowners, I hear the developers, I hear the hospital and the economic development people, but I've talked to people all over this county, and they like rural feel, they like green, they like spread out, and it's the reason they came down here. A lot of us in this room, we could have lived anywhere in metropolitan Atlanta we wanted to. We chose to live in this kind of environment.
Appreciate the comment.
Can we follow through, because this is a really hot topic.
Then I want to get, we're just about out of time. I want to get to Greg, so make it concise.
Julius, don't let me hijack what you got going. Keep going.
Go ahead, Todd.
The concept of the hamlets, Steve, was where we really tried to address, something that wouldn't be an either or, but an and both, and saying there's only so much acreage here, and currently you can have 1 or 2 acre lots there, and that equals a certain number of units. We tried to take that same number of units, plus or minus, and create them more congregated around certain hamlets, but at a higher density. So the overall feel is that you drive through, and yes, it's denser in those hamlets, but then you drive through and there's a lot more green in the surrounding areas, and you're protecting the wetlands better. If you go, and I'm not saying it'll turn out this way, but Serenbe is an example at the stream on the hamlets, and we're not talking about the same thing here at that level of density, but it's the same concept. Would you rather have 100 houses on 100 acres, or would you rather have 100 houses on 50 acres and then 50 acres of green space? That's a question that we got to really grapple with and say, what do we want for the future?
Thanks.
Okay,
Greg, go ahead.
Piggybacking on what Virginia said, and I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, but I also have 4 daughters, and they're pretty much going to be living out of the county when the 4th one graduates in May. She's going to Atlanta too. So I was happy to see that you do have a performing arts center drawn into the plans there. That's something I think we definitely need. I've had quite a few people in my short term as mayor mention to me. And I think that'd be a tremendous amenity, and make sure it's big enough with enough parking and access for the old folks, so we can wheel in there our wheelchairs and stuff. But I think that would help to attract the youth to have, or the younger professionals, I should say, perhaps, but have something for them.
Thanks. We're just about out of time. Let me get a couple more comments. Tim? Go ahead, sir. Herb?
Herb Frady.
Go ahead.
I would just like to make a comment that we've been partnering with Fayetteville in this venture for some time. We look forward to doing it in the future, and I think this is something that would be talked about for many, many years down the road if this comes to fruition. And I thank you guys for spending your time doing this. It's a great thing for Fayette County, and I'm looking forward to working with whoever we need to work with to further this progress in the fruition of this project. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Excuse me, Walt. And Tim? Thank you. Does everyone know Tim Hines?
Hi. What is this? Hi, I'm Tim. I'm a recovering university president. Just a couple of random comments. As much as we would like to preserve the present system is achievable if we can anticipate where the values that preserve that present system will be sometime in the future. Right. In one of the most, I think, repeated analogies, which I, of course, will add to by repeating here, the claim attributed to Wayne Gretzky of an important characteristic of skating to where the puck will be, and not where we think it is now. Because if we go to where we think things are now, it will pass us by. And no one will score a hat trick. So that's the first comment. I think while we all wish to preserve values that have been important to the county, to believe that we can preserve them through identical means that we've used in the past does not have much empirical validation. Second observation is about the establishment of higher education institutions. And I think it's in light of a university system that is reducing the number of institutions, as opposed to previous strategies, which is whenever there were 100 or more people gathered in thy name, one could have a university or a college. I think the ability to sustain those previous models is unlikely. And the more important question comes to be, what exactly or what are the values one is seeking when one wishes to have an institution of higher education? One can identify higher education institutions purely as an employer of choice. That is to say, we don't make much of a mess, right? We attract individuals who are highly educated with large sets of skills, also have the hope for plant and equipment that will be required to be maintained and therefore can bring in a diversified workforce. Okay, that's one reason for calling it an institution. But perhaps the more important reasons that have oftentimes been equated solely with a sense of place has been the development of intellectual capital. Right? The intellectual capital that comes from an upcoming generation, the historic 18 to 24-year-old, who have, to this point, been the main consumers of higher education. But it is also continuing education to address emerging workforce needs. Whether that continuing education is the development of a freestanding MBA program, which is offered in Peachtree City, whether it is the offerings of early preparation with dual enrollment programs that enroll more than 200 students in this county currently, and as we like to say technically, y'all come, any more can come. The notion of higher education's presence, I think, has to be identified first by a claim, what do you need to do? And, of course, continuing education serves the chronologically challenged population. I think Gray Tsunami is kind of negative, but the chronologically challenged, those of us who will continue to have a desire to continue to learn. The struggle that we have is that here in Fayette County, 25 years ago, there were views of how to bring in a creative class. And the question is, how do we continue to do that? And the wrestling is how much of the strategies that were used in the past will achieve that. and what are the combinations for the future. And so I applaud what I wouldn't call a straw man, because a straw man is something to knock over. I would simply suggest a wise and thoughtful starting point, which, as our colleague from the hospital says, they're there. There will be certain needs. Certain partners will be on your doorstep to see how we can work together, either a part of this development or a part of other developments.
Thank you for your comments, Tim. Very well said. Any other comments? We'll wrap it up right now. Oh, one more. Pass the microphone back, please. And you are?
I'm Donna Turner with Group 6 Real Estate.
Go ahead.
And one observation that I have is that I really think we need to involve the younger generation, you know, people's in their 20s and 30s. I mean, I'm looking around this room, and I don't really see, you know, what I would classify.
How do we get them to come?
A lot of younger people.
How do we
here.
get them to come?
I don't know. I'll have
It
to
works
think
for
about
me.
that. But, you know, they're the people that are going to have to buy into that. Because, you know, some of us aren't going to be here to live in those houses and to shop in those shops.
Right.
And then,
Okay, let's hear the rest of her
secondly is
comments.
that maybe it could be created as an area where you could kind of bring back, like it used to be, you know, way back when families all lived in the same area, and you could have different types of housing so that, you know, the parents could live in one type of housing, the kids with the family another one type thing, because, you know, there's really going to be more of that from what I'm reading, you know, where like our generation is having to take care of their parents.
Right.
So.
Thank you. Good comments. You know, the thing that continues to amaze me is, and again, when I spend time in places in Asia Pac like China, the central government basically says, okay, we want to build a dam or an airport or a stadium. We aren't going to have a dialogue. We aren't going to spend time wasting time, as they say, talking to people. We're just going to build it, and we're going to take your property, and that's it. We're actually spending time having this kind of dialogue, getting a diversity of opinions and perspective, which sometimes leads to a kind of interesting interaction, but in the end, it gets us where we want to go, because everyone in the kind of society that we have, not only in the county, but, you know, in the United States as a whole, we're able to sort of come together and talk about things and figure out where we want to go as a group. So I really applaud you all, and I applaud our panel members. Where did Aaron go? I applaud everybody for participating, for interacting, for taking time to be here. And I again want to thank Virginia for all of the hard work that she does with the Chamber. I mean, she's just an amazing person, and we need to give her another round of applause. So, and thank you all again for participating, for coming, for being a part of this. I really sincerely believe that this is leading to something great, and as we continue to have these gatherings, these dialogues, it continues to give us innovative ideas and creative input that's required to move forward in a deliberate way. So thank you. Oh, wait a minute, Virginia?
Actually, I wanted to thank Julius for, again, facilitating our meeting for us. Julius, thank you.
Okay,
You're always...
No, thank you. And the panelists.
And I also want to thank our panelists. Wonderful, wonderful conversation. And one last thank you to Heritage Bank and to our Ultimate Cafe and Studio 25 for all of your support tonight. I believe we have come to the end of our time for this quarter, but for our Leadership Fayette alumni, you all stay tuned. We have another, I think, really interesting dialogue planned. I would anticipate, based on this, that we will try and continue this dialogue as well, hopefully getting some of our young professionals involved in it. So with that, thank you, and we stand adjourned.